Welcome to Yarcine's Top 10 Plus 1 Overrated Musicals. Why Top 10 Plus 1? Because saying 11 would be ripping off Spinal Tap. And plus 1 because it really doesn't fit. And why not start off with something everyone loves to hate? Overrated musicals. To be counted as overrated for my list, it has to have serious overplay, a fairly large fan base. I have to have seen it. That's about it. The plus 1 doesn't quite fit the criteria, so why don't we just start with that plus 1? That was really cheesy. My special mention goes to Sweeney Todd. I love Sweeney Todd. It is one of my favorite musicals. I have not seen the stage version. I have only seen the recent movie because Tim Burton is freaking awesome. I do have the original Broadway soundtrack, and that is amazing. I think Sondheim's orchestration, and if he does the orchestration, and lyricism is superb. It's just, it's on overplay right now. Everyone's still talking about it, and I think in another 5 years, it'll be okay to talk about Sweeney Todd again, but in the meantime, we kind of need to let Sweeney die, because the overplay is going to kill it, and then everyone's going to hate it. And it's too good of a musical to hate. So now on to the real biting criticism of my top 10 overrated musicals. Number 10, Rent. Part of the reason I hate it, not really hate it, but it's on this list, is because the first act is really good. I love the first act. I think it's got great music. The characters are interesting. They actually seem to develop within one act, which is, really good. Most of the time you don't get character development till the end of Act 2. So the thing about Rent, though, is Rent's Act 2 falls apart. Just not nearly as good, not nearly as tight as Act 1. Vibo M is like the climax of the film, because it's the best part, and then after that everything's sort of like, okay, this sort of makes sense, but it could be tighter. Now, I know some of the Rent fan people will comment and be like, but the writer was dying of AIDS, and that is terribly sad. I'm not trying to discredit the fact that dying of AIDS is bad. I'm saying that just because a man is dying doesn't mean there can be some editorial input on an act. About Rent is that its fans think it is the most original piece of Broadway musicaldom in forever, and it's not. Race and sex are like big themes of Rent, obviously, but Hair did it first. Fandom. Hair did it first. Now, fans can argue that Rent took on AIDS. Well, no musical really came out after AIDS that took on serious issues until Rent. So, yes, Rent gets AIDS. But remember, this is why it's toward the top of the list. Number 9. The hills are alive with the sound of music. Why? Because as good as the film is, and as beautiful as the film is, oddly, the stage show isn't as good. Sound of Music is one of those few musicals that translated better on film. Don't ask me why. I think it had something to do with the rearranging and turning Pale Pink Goat Herd into a Big Lipped Alligator moment, which is, if you're singing a song about a goat, it darn well better be a Big Lipped Alligator moment, or else there's just no point. I mean, goats are meant for Big Lipped Alligator moments. Also, on film, they could portray the Nazis better. You could really see the big drastic changes happening. The film just had some, better things than the stage version. And 8, 42nd Street / dance shows in general. 42nd Street is basically the archetypal dance show. Lots of good music, good tap numbers. I have seen 42nd Street twice. I have been in 42nd Street once. Once was enough. The plot is there, kind of. And the tricky thing about 42nd Street is if you don't have the right people playing every single character, you don't get the characterization or the plot nearly so well. You need the right people in the right places. There are some musicals where you can sort of miscast some of the characters, but 42nd Street, it's like every character has to be spot on, and you can't do that because they're all too precise. And then the dancing, you know, when you're spending most of your rehearsals practicing dance numbers or sitting around watching the dancers practice their dance numbers, the plot's going to fall by the wayside, and it does. Grease Lightning. I've seen the movie about 1.5 million times, so for me it's overplay. Everyone considers it one of those, you know, great American classics, and really the plot kind of lacks for the whole first act. It's mostly, you know, Sandy should have dumped Danny because he's a jerk and won't accept her for who she is. That's the whole first act in a nutshell. And then the second act, more specifically the ending, is Sandy giving up everything she holds dear to be Danny's girlfriend. Because that is the message that we want to send to our little girls, America, that you should give up everything you hold precious and true to get the bad boy. On top of this, it's hard getting guys who dance well in non-professional musicals. And when they're not professional, they're community, you know, some of the guys who end up dancing in Grease Lightning shouldn't be dancing in Grease Lightning. I don't want to talk about it, really. But yeah, Grease, overdone. The musical on stage is slightly better than the movie. School version of Grease, that bothers me too, because it cuts out everything that makes Grease Grease and said you could call it soap suds instead of Grease, and it would actually be okay if you just called the school version soap suds. Number 6, Peter Pan. Some childhood classics stay classics even when you're an adult. However, Peter Pan is not one of them. Maybe it was because the last time I saw it, Peter Pan was played by a balding Asian man. Maybe it's because I'm a girl and I don't find Peter Pan as interesting. Or maybe it's the fact that even as a little kid I realized growing up had serious benefits, and identifying with a character who doesn't grow up is really hard to do. That's why in most, you know, media out there, when there's an immortal character, he doesn't want to be immortal. However, seeing Peter Pan want to stay man-childish forever, I don't know, you can't identify with it. On top of, you know, when you're young, you think clapping for the little light is cute. When you're like 17 or like 40, clapping for the light, the fading light, not nearly so interesting. There are good a lot of people might say, well, you don't like Peter Pan. No. There are adaptations of Peter Pan I liked. Like the one that came out a couple of years ago, that was a good adaptation. I really liked that. I also really enjoyed Hook, even though a lot of people consider it a bad movie for some reason. I enjoy Hook. I think it's a good movie. But the stage show, not so much. It does have some interesting music, but mostly I think it exists to entertain boys who get dragged to the theater and have a theater show to stuff lots of little girls into, so their stage moms can